chancel. And at first glance, those years ago, this is a normal chancel. The altar at the far end, the window behind, is vaulted, which is unusual. They didn't often vault these. And the vaulting has remains of basket work, as you can see. You see the lines in the mortar. That's from the wicker that they used to set the vault. And that's a typical 15th century technique. And there are patches of it here and there, which have survived. Other indications of a 13th century date would be these little holes here, which we call putlog holes. And these are scaffolding holes. And in the 13th century, they, in the Middle Ages, when they're scaffolding as they're building, they've got timber scaffolding, they put the timber through the wall, so it goes all the way through the wall. So it's not like a modern steel scaffolding. And when they're finished, they either pull it out or they saw it off and they leave the timber in. And that's how the dates for Trim Castle came out. They actually sawed off the timber and the tree ring dates were available. If they leave the timber in, it often rots. Sometimes what they do is they cover in the stone, they stick a stone in, but they can take it away if they need to re-erect the scaffolding. And these types of holes are very typical of 13th century building, and they're on the outside as well. So I'd be very happy that this is fundamentally 13th century choir, a chancel, that it was vaulted, which is odd. It was a big vault, exceptionally big, and that it was repaired and that the access to it was stuck in afterwards. Now I'm assuming that is not cement. It looks to be the same as the plasterwork. And you can see the lines running towards the window. Those are the impressions of small planks that they've used to make the arch. And that is an Anglo-Norman building technique. So that's Anglo-Norman. So, walk down again, starting the ceiling roof, and come down to look up here. And there you can see them again, with a blocked window, Anglo-Norman. And then this is the most interesting one, as you can see little bits of it in there again. Now, when you look along the wall, you can see the window with the planks is turning into a vault, which would suggest this might have been vaulted in the 13th century, and would suggest that what we're looking at here is repair of the vault. So we might have a 13th century vaulted chancel. I can't think of an alternative explanation for what happens with that window, the way the plank centering comes out into the vault. So that would be very unusual. On the outside, I'll show you when we go outside, there's a little bit of that window left on the outside. It's a 13th century window, very little of it left. So I think we've got a 13th century chancel. The window down there has been replaced, but it's the right location for one. So two windows at this end, two windows at the far end. Unusual not to have a window in between, very strange. It's quite dark originally, but I think that's what it is. Then the vault gets added on. The vault is built originally, then it gets repaired, and that's what we're looking at. We're looking at repair. And at some stage, this gets added on. Now, this is very interesting because that's not straightforward either. This chancel had the vault added on in the 15th century, and when they added the vault on to the chancel in the 15th century, they needed to get up to the roof, so they put the doorway and the stairs in to get you up there. So that's why I thought there was no complication here at all. So when we originally looked at this, and I was the buildings person back then, my sense was that this might be a 13th century church in two parts. In the 15th century they vaulted it, they added on the stairs, and there were lots of little alterations afterwards. Very uncomplicated, but actually very complicated, because the first thing you notice as you walk in is the sides are at different angles. That's an unusual thing to do in a building. If you're building something like this, you tend to straighten things up. The second thing is this doorway here is a late medieval doorway, so this would be around the same date as the wicker work up there. So that's fine. So that confirms that this is an add-on. But this is not in situ. If you look in here, you'll be able to see that this has a much more complex moulding than that. That this has been re-erected from somewhere else. So it's a 15th century doorway, but it wasn't made for this location. So we could be talking, say, 17th century insertion. The style of the stairs we went up is very 15th century-ish, but 200 years later it could have done the same thing. So I'm inclined to the view that the way up onto the roof was different until late in the building's history. This was stuck in and they reused a doorway from somewhere else. So it's a very, very strange thing to do.